Okay, I'm gonna call to order the Community Police Review Board meeting here Tuesday, June 10th at 5:30. And we'll do the roll call. Braddock,
Present?
Hobart Collis,
Here.
Jensen, here, Mekas, Atkins,
Here.
Schwint.
Here.
Okay, item number 2, I need a motion to appoint me, the city staff person, as temporary chairperson.
I will make that motion.
Second. Alright. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, so now item number 3, we're going to do nominations for chairperson. So I need a motion for nominations for chairperson.
I will move that Melissa Jensen be nominated as the new chairperson.
Any other nominations?
How do you feel about that?
What?
How do you feel about that?
Is this the part where I have to give a speech?
No, that'll come later.
That comes later.
Yes. Okay, so any others nominations? Okay, I need a motion to close nominations for chairperson.
Make a motion?
I will second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, so, and now we'll do a vote, but first, if you want to speak at all, say anything, this would be the time
I
to.
really don't want to do
Okay,
that.
you don't
Thank you,
have
Lori.
to.
No, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Okay. All right, so our first and only nominee is Melissa. All right, and so I'm going to do a roll call here to nominate Melissa as the new chairperson. So answer with, a or nay, aye or nay. So Braddock,
Aye.
Hobart Collis,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Mekas, Atkins,
Aye.
Schwint.
Aye.
Okay, so the motion passes.
You're doing an excellent job.
5 to thanks. I had a good teacher. Okay. All right, so Melissa is your new chairperson and she'll begin chairing at the July 8th meeting. All right, so now we're going to do nominations for vice chairperson. So I need a motion for nominations for vice chair.
I will move that David Schwint be nominated as vice chair.
So you're making the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay.
Paybacks.
Paybacks.
For
I heard
David.
that.
Okay. All right. So David's on the docket. Any other nominations for vice chair? Okay. So we're going to close the nominations. All in favor of closing?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. All right, now we'll do a vote after David would like, if he would like to speak or say anything at this point.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so gonna do a roll call here to promote, or not promote him, but place him in the vice chair position.
That salary
Yeah.
goes for this.
Doubled.
All right.
Double.
Hobart Collis,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Mekas, Atkins,
Aye.
Schwint,
Aye.
Braddock.
Aye.
Okay. All right. So, no other nominees. Congratulations, you're the vice chair, and you will now take over.
So-
You'll start with item number 5.
Yeah, I saw this. So procedurally, I have a question. Why does the vice chair immediately take over another chair? I don't mind doing
Because,
this.
because
the
the
vice
chair
chair.
isn't here.
Oh. Okay.
And Saul is the chair until June 30th, which is when his term ends. That's why the chair won't take over or won't start chairing until the July 8th.
And we don't have a current vice chair.
Correct. She
all right.
resigned, so. But you know this. You've been to enough meetings.
I guess I should have paid closer attention to all of this, but that's all right.
So, right, you'll start
Yep.
with item 5, the
Item
consent
5.
calendar.
Consider a motion adopting the consent calendar as presented or amended.
So moved.
Second.
I have questions about this just because I'm a newbie. So is there time for a little discussion?
That is
of this?
great
Yeah.
now.
Step
Okay.
2.
So there, on these use of force things, how is the committee chosen to consider these reports? In other words, I guess one question I have is, would an officer be in a position of deciding whether his own or her own force was appropriate?
Could you answer that? for us?
Jeff, if you know the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the purpose of the review for them, because that's all done through the initial report, when they submit the report, and then it goes to their supervisors, and then command staff, and then when I compile that report for them, or for this board, the use of force review, usually it's a supervisor, and generally one with a use of force background. If I can, I mean, if somebody's available for that, but if it's an officer, they're not looking at necessarily whether the force is appropriate. That's already been done through that entire process, through all of the previous reviews.
And the previous reviews are done by the chief or by that?
Yeah, so the chief looks at all
Okay.
of them, the captains look at them, and so their watch supervisors also look at them.
Okay.
So it pretty much goes through every level of supervision.
Okay, and this is just a dumb question, but what is a BWC review?
Body worn camera.
I see,
Yeah.
okay. And then it's probably in the policy somewhere, but to be brutally frank, I haven't familiarized myself with all of them. But with respect to the February 2025 use of force review, on page 5, there's a reference to a joint manipulation, and on page 7, there's a reference to a knee on the chest of the subject. And I was wondering, are those consistent with procedures?
Sure, I mean, it could be, just depending on what's going on, what the
Okay.
situation is, and if it was deemed to be reasonable, given the situation.
What was going on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, after George Floyd and stuff there, you can't mess with people's
Right.
necks and stuff like that, but these are appropriate holds, is what somebody's decided. Who decides this? I mean, and I guess that's another question I have about this consent calendar. I mean, these policies that are being proposed, who wrote them? Are we supposed to really review and make statements about them, or what is the purpose of the consent calendar per se?
So this came up, I kind of asked this question when I started too, and this is just us kind of understanding and stating we are receiving these policies, not that we're signing off on them or we agree with the contents of them. And so what we had talked about in the past is picking certain ones of those to discuss at specific meetings and intentionally reviewing them and coming back with questions on that.
Okay.
So this is just us receiving them.
Receiving them, okay, got it.
Other than the minutes of the previous meeting.
Right,
You
okay.
can make suggested changes if anything was incorrect in the minutes.
Okay. Just, who does these policies? Who writes the policies? Is that you, Pat?
Oh, no.
No.
No, Jeff, could you?
So-
Oh, Dave.
The policy, so we're moving to Lexipol, which, so they give us a template, so to speak, of a policy. Let's say it's the use of force policy.
Okay.
So what our process right now, that's why it's taking longer than, we don't just take what Lexipol gives us and accept that. Excuse me. We will, so we take that, we compare it to what our current general order says. And Sue can attest to this too, because she's part of the process.
Oh, is she
generally
writing
for a lot of
these?
the policies.
Do I write
The
them?
city
No.
attorney's office.
I review them.
She reviews them.
Okay.
But we'll take what we currently have and we'll compare that to what Lexipol has. And we'll retain stuff from our current. So we do probably more than a lot of departments do as far as adding stuff to the policies and maintaining what we already have. And we don't just use what Lexipol gives us, because a lot of times it's somewhat vague. They're watered down a lot of times. Gives you the shell, it gives you the basic language that you need for the policy, but we find that our existing general orders will include a lot more language that we want or that we want to keep. Does that make sense? Does that
Yes,
answer your
yes,
question?
yeah.
Yeah, so we,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, so it'll generally start with me. So I'll take what Lexipol gives us, I'll go through it. And then I might send it to one of the content experts, like the use of force instructors, or if it's the use of force. But anybody that may have more in-depth knowledge about that particular area, then I'll let them go through it. And then it'll go to the captains, and then it'll go to the chief, and then Sue's office will review it as well,
Okay.
And
for
is
any
it
legal issues.
existing policies that were in existence before Lexipol, those have been through, would it be correct, those have been through the accreditation process as well?
Correct, yeah.
So,
So then, so as part of the that's a good question. So as part of the accreditation process, then we'll replace. So once the use of force, the Lexipol use of force version came out, then we'll retire the general order. So we will not use the general order anymore. And we'll just refer to the Lexipol policy. And then that Lexipol policy will also be the document we use for accreditation. So that's a process too, where you have to go in and replace those and. Yeah. So you've probably seen both in some of your reviews, where we'll refer to general orders, we'll refer to just the number, which is typically Lexipol, if that makes sense.
And so as far as this committee is concerned, as David said, we're acknowledging what we've received them. If anybody has a question, then that's a request for a future agenda item. Is that?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
is-
We can put that on for business for the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome, yeah.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the consent calendar? Yeah, I guess. But with a roll call?
Yeah. Jensen,
yes.
Mekas, Atkins,
Yes.
Schwint,
Yes.
Braddock,
Yes.
Hobart Collis.
Yes.
And consider a motion to accept correspondence from Mary McCann included in the late handouts.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, on to item 6, new business. Discuss Senate File 311 and the future of the CPRD.
So I'll jump in, that's why I kind of came tonight. So everybody got a copy of Senate File 311 in the packet. And on that very first page of the bill, the new subsection is really what deals with the review board. Whereas it states a city with a civil service commission, and I'm just hitting the highlights, shall not adopt, enforce, or otherwise administer an ordinance, motion, resolution, amendment to establish a board or other entity for the purpose of citizen review of the conduct of officers as defined under section 80F.1. So what that does is it kind of takes away your ability to review complaints from citizens regarding police officer conduct. And so in light of the governor signing that, City Council invited you all to come to a joint work session on June 17th at 4, just to kind of hear your thoughts about what, if any, role the CPRB might serve going forward. The bill is effective August 16th of this year. And so effective that date, you won't be able to review those complaints any longer. And so I guess it's just kind of your time to discuss amongst yourselves what you think that role would be. I mean, options, whether terminating the board, and council would then take it out of the code and out of the charter, or if you're gonna continue, what would the role be minus that review process? Which is why I kind of put in the code sections, and just with a quick kind of review of chapter 8, there's a few sections that are non-complaint related that I just did some highlights. 882M, which is on page 2, 8820, which is on page 3, and 887C3, which is on page 7, that really don't have anything to do with complaints. Not that, and Pat can kind of, if I missed something, hop in there and kind of direct you guys during your discussion, but I just thought that would be a good starting point to get you guys going.
Is it right, Kelly, that and/or Sue, that the Civil Service Commission really does not review citizen complaints? It's more about the relationship between the city and employees of the city?
I think that would be accurate, yeah.
Okay. What about, and this is a question for the board, I guess. What about suggesting to the city council that instead of a review board, that they create a committee, perhaps consisting of members of this board who would like to do it, the chief or his delegate, and anybody else the council thinks is appropriate, to formulate a new board or committee that maybe it's called Peace Officers and Citizen Collaboration Committee. So the idea would be, you know, we saw in Saul's letter that he was concerned that there were numerous repetitive complaints by the same individual. And I think one of the complaints that we're supposed to deal with today is somebody that this board has dealt with several times before. And in the tapes, that gentleman,
You have to be careful
Yeah.
about talking
Okay.
about this
Okay.
in open session.
okay, so there, shut me up if I'm going over the line here, but it seems like there have been some officers who have been really good at mediating these issues with people who have chronic complaints. And I am wondering if there could be some ongoing committee that, again, it wouldn't be to review the officer conduct, but maybe almost an educational mechanism or collaboration between citizens and the police, because it sounds like a lot of these complaints are a failure to understand the things that officers have to do, and that if people were, and maybe there could even be an educational component of this. We were sort of talking about this today, you know, where, old lady speaking, but it used to be that, you know, you wouldn't have people trying to interfere with arrests. you know, as an officer, you respect what the officer says. Maybe this committee is partly about doing a little short class to schools about, you know, if you interact with an officer, this is how you interact, and oh, by the way, if you don't, here's what can happen, you know. So I guess instead of and so it would have to be a matter of creating new rules, new policies for this committee. But the idea would be, let's deflect possible lawsuits, because if people have no venue to express their concerns, what are they going to do? You know, they're going to file lawsuits maybe. And so this would be one way to avoid that, and also facilitate communication and cooperation between citizens and peace officers. Anyway, I'm suggesting that we suggest that as one possible way of going forward to the city council. But again, people who've been here longer and know, I mean, Sue will remember this quote, but someone we both know has a famous phrase that some people are no damn good. And, you know, I understand that there are some people, often referred to familiarly as frequent flyers, that this is not going to work. But some people just don't understand, and maybe, I'm sorry, the next part was going into a part that we have to do in closed session. Anyway, just an idea.
Do the crisis liaisons do any?
They do. Yeah, they do.
Okay. I don't know, maybe someone, because I don't know if Maureen's familiar with that.
I am not.
If, do you know, I mean,
The,
I know the chief would usually speak to.
So the embedded clinicians?
Yeah, community
Yeah.
liaison.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You probably know more about their work than I
okay,
do.
yeah.
Oh. I mean, I know minimally, and then if you want to correct
Yeah.
me, but they're staff members at community, whether they're social workers, counselors, etc. Anyone with like our type of licensure are able to work for them, and they are there. They can be called out to calls with the officers alongside of them. They're typically dressed in like street clothes, but they do wear like safety gear if needed as well. And so they're there to really like help with crisis intervention, offer resources, get them connected with shelters, all the community items, get them to pantries, all that stuff. But they're really there for like crisis stabilization.
I think they also do follow-up as well, right? For if there's
really?
not one
Yeah, they'll
that
do
is
case
actively working, or even if it's something they responded to follow up after.
And then they contact, they work closely with all of the hospitals. I've worked with them from the hospital, so they're very much like community partners with all the hospitals as well, like for mental health commitments and things too.
Mechanically, let's say you have some kind of altercation going on at 2 o'clock in the morning. How, I mean, can these people get to the scene in time to be of assistance?
So I know that they were on call at one point in North Liberty, I think it was. One of them worked like overnights at one, maybe, I don't know, do you know? They were working, like one of them was working like an overnight shift at one point, because they were, when I was working closely with the Coralville PD, they were trying to hire someone for the gap hours. And so, but I know they had someone at one point was working some overnights.
We would use mobile crisis. I think they were available
They do.
24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not, I don't know how often we use them.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to be my question, because I saw on your use of force reports, mental health, and I mean.
That could be the mental health liaisons that we have, you know, at the PD that work through community. They're typically just, till 10 p.m. or so, 10 or 11 p.m. So, yeah, we don't have anybody in here overnight, so then they would probably call mobile crisis. And I don't think our community staff members are on call at all. Not that I know of, but.
What is mobile crisis exactly?
That's just they call, they what would you say, counselors or they're
I would say like
Well-
mental health workers.
yeah, and they're available as like a call out basis.
And so, again, I don't know how, when you're trying to deal with somebody who's acting out, can you get somebody there real fast enough to be of assistance? And how often do you try?
That I don't know. I don't have the specific stats on that. I'm pretty disconnected from patrol right now in my current role, so I don't know how often they call, or if I know in the past there were issues with response times, and I think that was one thing the mobile crisis was trying to fix, was to have faster response times and be more available, things like that. I don't know what the status of that is now and whether or not we call them on a regular basis. I know a lot of these are probably referrals. So if overnights deals with somebody, then it's referred to the liaisons and probably for follow-up the following day would be my guess. That probably happens fairly frequently. But as far as how often we call mobile crisis anymore, I don't have those specific numbers.
And are they employees of the city, or who do they work for?
Through community.
Like, are they volunteers, or they work?
No, they're staff, like through community, the organization. So community is, yeah. Do you know what community?
No.
Community, I don't know how
Used
the
to be
best way to
crisis.
describe, yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
So they're
He
staff
translated
through
for the old lady.
them. So they're staff through them, and then the police departments have the contracts with them.
I see, okay. So volunteers, really, then?
No, they're
crisis center?
staff.
They're
Yeah, they're
full-time.
staff. They're like counselors or social workers.
Okay,
Yeah, they're salary staff.
okay.
I'm curious about what the city's position is on, I get the part about the bill being signed and all of that and what it says the deadline is and everything. Just what the city's response is to, we don't like this, but these are, some of our ideas for alternatives, or we're gonna push back, or we're not gonna push back, that kind, if that makes sense.
None of that's been decided. I mean, that's in part, this is gonna be
Part
part
of
of
it,
that
that's
discussion.
right.
Yeah.
And there'll be the joint meeting, and then council will have to make some decisions.
Okay. Okay.
I was gonna note also about one of the last comments that you made when you started this discussion is that community members can always file a complaint directly with the police department.
Right.
And also with the Human Rights Commission, I think.
Yes.
But I don't know how this new legislation affects that commission. Not at all.
No.
Yeah.
Does the Human Rights Commission only deal with protected classes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And anything that's with our officer that gets forwarded to the state.
If I'm not
To investigate our own officers.
If I'm not mistaken, Human Rights is also looking for members as well.
Oh,
I
that's
think I
true,
saw-
that's true.
I
Yeah.
saw something come
commission
out today
takes
from
on
the
it.
city for, yeah.
So I guess it seems to me there is still a gap here, because if, the Civil Service Commission and Human Rights have their own silos, but, and maybe it's insignificant. I'm asking people who have some experience here, unlike me, because it is true from the limited observations I have that this board very, very typically agrees with the assessments of the chief, which is a great thing. I'm just wondering if having some kind of civilian involvement would make people feel better, basically. And maybe a problem-solving thing, so maybe members of the public would come up with some ideas that might avoid future problems. If they feel like they've been victimized, they may say, well, why don't you do this? Or even just being heard, I guess is what I'm saying, beyond the people they're complaining against.
So as I've thought about the future and kind of what the board was intended to do, which in my mind, simplify it, was review the investigations and complaints and provide feedback on policies. It takes at least one of those off the new state legislation. So that leaves the policy and other things. So I've been trying to wrap my head around, those are all things anyone could do from home with an internet connection on their sofa. They can review policies, they can provide feedback. Anybody can do that. To me, this board was unique to have a board because we got access to information that's not publicly available. Once that goes away, is there a need to limit it to a small board anymore? Or since what's remaining is seemingly stuff anyone can do on a volunteer basis whenever they want, is there a reason to have a board and a budget and staff time and all of that to do things people can otherwise do anytime?
And I guess I'm suggesting that rather than call it a review, which sounds very judgmental, and you know, I keep asking you officers questions because I don't know. I mean, I always wonder how civilians can review the actions of officers when we're not trained, you know. But I do think that there's value to allowing a regular communication between civilians and, I guess, I mean, what are they going to do if there's no board like this? Are they going to go to the city council? Are they going to file lawsuits? I'm just wondering if there can be some entity that would really fill that slot without officers feeling, and obviously the legislature feeling like, who are we to be reviewing these officers? Which I understand that, you know. But especially, I mean, I think from what I've seen, our current chief and law enforcement are very, very open to communication. But I don't know if the citizens understand that or have any ability to interface with that. If you file a complaint and you get a letter back, but you're being reviewed by somebody you've already complained against. I think that's the way your average citizen's going to look at that.
Yeah, I guess this is probably, it's unfortunate timing that the chief is not available to be here, because as I was thinking through what could replace this, it would be more, is there an opportunity here for a more, I'll use the word formal, but kind of a chief's advisory committee of the chief, because it could be expanded to whatever size. It doesn't have to be the size of a board. And I thought through that, because if whatever that group looks like that the chief puts together could sit around a table or in a meeting room and just have those frank, open discussions with more members from all different, anyone who wants to be involved, without having to put something on as an action item and then follow it up the following month to actually be able to discuss it. But I found some of our most interesting conversations to me have happened in executive session when people can just talk freely and we're not following a flow chart. And so how could we have a system that's more like that creates a benefit given the situation we're in now?
Maybe a suggestion to council in the work session about a not a task force, but some kind of an informal, like you say, a community awareness or just a listening
post.
Kind of something that the city would be willing to investigate that. Because I don't think any of us disagree, I would guess, with, otherwise we wouldn't be here if we didn't care. But I think it's kind of a fine line sometimes too about people coming to other citizens and wanting to complain or, wanting information about the police department and one of us being in the position of trying to answer that. you know, I think that could be kind of a fine line for us to have to navigate. But if it was more of a, you know, a listening post or a community, you know, just a community listening opportunity, and, you know, I'm making this up, once every, you know, every quarter, or once every 6 months, or, you know, at least from the standpoint of folks that would be concerned about CPRB no longer existing, here's an opportunity, you know, to kind of ease that. We don't have any choice, you know.
What
You do
about,
have the community forum that you do every year, so.
I was just thinking that's kind of what I think it sounds like you're
Maybe
talking.
restructuring, yeah. I mean, just as an option.
And just so that the board's aware, and just from your comments and Dave's comments, if it's a council-appointed commissioner committee, you are gonna have that structure with the open records and open meetings laws. If it's more of something like you were talking about, that the chief puts together some group and they meet on a quarterly basis, whatever, and it's folks that have agreed to meet with the chief and it doesn't go through council, you don't have that structure. You can have that open, kind of ended conversations.
Open dialogue as it
Yes,
comes up.
Yeah.
what about suggesting to the council that they appoint a committee to make some specific recommendations about incorporating these ideas into some ongoing process?
I like Dave's idea of the advisory piece. I think, from my perspective, whether agree or not agree, it seems clear that in August, part of the responsibility of this commission no longer exists,
Yeah.
which I think is a key component. There are other communities in the state that don't have this type of board existing, and so we could certainly try to understand how those communities have continued to operate by sort of mitigating some of the challenges I think that you brought forward, Maureen. But I like the advisory piece if it would be useful to the chief, because I think that's what it is, right? In the end, it's the chief and the way in which he provides leadership for that department. My guess would be is he would probably find value in some type of formal feedback, and he's the person to sort of determine, boy, I really would like to get some citizen feedback on this particular maybe policy or this particular practice, or boy, this situation took place, let me sort of get another set of eyes on this to get their feedback. And from a citizen's perspective, right, it gives those folks an opportunity to have, be participating in that. But also, I mean, I think you were alluding to, or maybe you even said clearly, there's a process for some of this stuff for folks to go directly to get access to policy and provide feedback and those types of things. So I would be challenged, I think, to continue to have some type of structure that exists to do stuff that already is happening in another format or another way. I just don't know that it will be as valuable. The intent is there, but I'm just not sure that it would be as valuable as we would like it to be. So I think there's something about that advisory piece that's interesting and could continue to provide this citizen perspective to the work that you all do in the department. So I think you're onto something there. It'd be interesting to see where the chief would be on that, right? He might be like, well, I'm not sure that that's a great idea, but I think that's a practice that's used in other areas of the way people do their work, right? So it wouldn't be unique to a police department. Certainly lots of organizations use advisory structures in order to inform their work and provide voice for folks that might think differently than they do, so they're able to offer the best possible service.
And Also makes me wonder to loop in what you were talking about, kind of the education, the community education piece of how, this would be another question for the chief probably, unless you want to speak for him since you're here. Okay.
Doing very well.
That's why he's a vice chair.
The department currently does community outreach activities.
Oh, do they?
So how could an advisory board or one or more advisory board members kind of go with department staff for those community outreach activities in different ways? So I don't know, there may be a way to kind of merge the two, where it is that not only do we have the officer here to speak to this neighborhood group, but we have 2 members that are just volunteers from the community who are on the advisory board and sit in the meetings with the city staff and the discussions and kind of speak more as an outsider voice. So it's not just somebody in uniform standing there talking to maybe a neighborhood who's having problems or a school, et cetera. So there could be a way to kind of blend the two as well.
Well, then that makes me wonder, can they collaborate with the community, of course, now that I'm blanking.
CVP or
No. Community Police Academy.
Oh,
Citizens
Like
Police
Citizens Police
Yes,
Academy, yeah.
thank
Yep.
you. And so, like, I was involved in that, and that's how I learned about this. And so, like, could there be collaboration there? Because then you're not duplicating work. Like, they're already working to do that type of stuff. Like, they have multiple people come in. You, as the community member, you're learning about all these different things. Like, could there just be collaboration between all of these different, like Coralville here? I don't know if North Liberty has a board, but that way you're not duplicating.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Somebody asked Sue whether the city's taking a position. In other words, is there going to be an effort to fight this legislation? My question to the board or the committee here is, do we want to make a recommendation in that regard?
I would say not, perhaps, but just, I mean, I think we could certainly say, what are our options? I mean, that would have been a better way for me to say it. What are our options? Probably not a lot. Are there going to be lawsuits? Any lawsuits? That kind of thing. But I mean, I guess what the end goal would be.
Well, I mean, Sue, is the city considering various options at this point?
Nothing's been considered.
Okay. What, from your perspective, what options exist?
I don't know. I mean,
Are you
That's
running
why
for
we're here,
something?
right?
I'm kidding.
no, I'm not running for anything, but I mean, legislature's acted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cities get their authority from the legislature,
Yeah.
from the state. That's kind of that's how it works.
Mhm.
So,
I think we would have had to do stuff prior to it being signed. Like, we're way past the point of anything happening
we're
at
in a-
this point.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can
Kind of a narrow spot.
suggest to legislators that they take action in the next session, but
Right.
does that do any good now?
But
No.
no, yeah, right now we're,
Yeah.
I mean, we should have, if we wanted to do stuff, we would have had to do it prior.
I like the idea of a suggestion that, and that it could be a suggestion about investigating some type of, whatever the wordsmithing is, advisory, try to stay away from the structure as much as possible. Try to make it a little more open and welcoming for discussions, just, some type of advisory, whether it's panel or listening post or, that the city would investigate that. I mean, I could see some opportunities there.
Mm-hmm.
And also from the, city perspective and just saying, okay, we did this because we thought it was the right thing. Well, now we're done.
Mhm.
At least could be kind of a little bit of a segue to say, we're gonna investigate this as an option, potentially get some community feedback, this wouldn't be the same thing, but, you know, look at what our choices might be to do this in a more informal type setting or communication type setting.
In terms of structure, you know, the options that this committee has in responding to a complaint, I've been interested in the fact that it sounds like the committee has never invited the complainant to speak to the committee. Is that right?
No, the complainant has come and spoken to the committee in years past. It doesn't happen very often.
Has the committee invited them, or do they just show up, or what happens?
That's part of the actual, or at least it used
It's
to
one of the
be, isn't it?
remedies. that-
I know that we have had, I'm trying to think back, we've had a couple of people that have come and spoken to the committee.
And
But
what
it's
did
been a while.
how did was that a useful sort of thing? I guess because I'm asking that in the connection with your listening post idea.
Times that I can recall, I don't know that I mean, I think it's an opportunity for the person, the complainant, to be heard.
Yes, yeah.
That's where it's useful. I don't know that it, in the particular scenarios I'm thinking of, that it made any kind of it swayed anybody on the committee and where we were with what we thought about the complaint and where we landed. But, you know, it's an opportunity. I mean, which we offer that for, might be the part where the complainant, once they get the chief's report, have an opportunity to respond back, and there's so many days. Typically, that's where a person would say, I'd like to come talk to the board.
And
You know,
nobody ever
that's
does
where it
that?
could be.
Is it- That's a question.
A complainant can say that.
Have they done it?
We have. I mean, it's been a while. It was,
Yeah, I guess I haven't been part of anything
Okay.
where
Yeah.
one has, but.
I can think of one in particular. I'm looking at Kelly, because Kelly was the
Yeah,
liaison.
that hasn't happened since I've been council.
Maybe
But I
two.
mean, I typically there's no response back from the complainant once they get the chief's report.
I feel like anecdotally, by the time the process moves through and gets to this board and it gets to the point where that person could come in, all of those emotions of something that happened 2-3 months ago have
Have
died down and
subsided,
they're just
yeah.
ready to have it behind them. Whereas, you know,
Yeah,
I think that could contribute to it as well.
I do. I agree.
They also can speak to a city council member anytime, right? I mean, a citizen can always come forward to a city council meeting or reach out to their representative for concerns related to any of this too.
The listening post?
Do they offer does
Oh,
the,
excuse me, the council listening post? Is
Yeah.
that what you?
Yeah.
Oh.
so they could certainly, I mean, that certainly is a part of that as well, right? So,
Yeah, if we tell them that, remind the council that, they're gonna establish a committee, so it doesn't happen. I'm kidding. So,
I mean, that might be maybe the suggestion about, you know, again, I'm not coming up with the right words, but, you know, a suggestion to investigate opportunities that might be to share that information with the public, or remind that these are some additional options. This is where we are with this, but, you know, almost like I almost started to say a PIO kind of thing, but, you know, information for the community about, okay, this is what has changed. Here's some options. We're looking at this as an opportunity on how we can offer some additional opportunities for communication. You can do this right now. You can do these things. You can reach out to your city council person. You can do a listening when they have listening posts, attend a neighborhood party. You know, a neighborhood coffee with a cop. I think there was that for a while maybe, and you know, and kind of that, and again, you know, might be an opportunity to.
so are you suggesting that either this board or the council put together some sort of written statement that could be disseminated to citizens? You know, if you have a concern, here are your options. You know, some formal way of notifying them?
I think if to do that would come through the city through Lee or public information. you know, and something, I'm just thinking there might be that opportunity to, you know, craft some kind of message like that.
Is that something that we should suggest to the council that they do, or they have somebody do? I'm just wondering how to make it happen.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of like that idea of it might be a good placeholder on the Community Police Review Board portion of the city website. Just a notification that this board, due to this state legislation, has been disbanded, for example, if that's the decision. Here are the resources that you have available to you, such and such, I think is what you're...
That's a great idea. And so who does it? Who writes it? No.
Well, that would be public information, right? Who does the Facebook pages? Who does, you know, all of that? Is it Lee?
Yeah, the communications.
It's Lee, okay.
Hermiston, is that where? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's, you know, all the social media things,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if he authors those, who would author this to list out all of that, but he would certainly have the ability to update it with authorization.
Yeah.
So what steps do we take to pursue that?
Well, that could be a suggestion from
this
this group at the work session.
Great.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
I
Yeah,
think that's
I
a
think-
great idea.
I think so.
Okay.
You could perhaps keep some sort of a complaint review process in place, not for the purpose of deciding whether a particular officer's conduct was wrong, but rather whether policy should be changed. Because the way you described it earlier, some of the good discussions is when somebody makes a complaint about what happened, and that leads to a discussion about policy. So if we're not necessarily taking complaints for the purpose of saying, yes, Officer A acted inappropriately, but instead saying, here's what the policy says, and here's maybe what the policy should say, you could still, you know, invite the public to make complaints.
Boy, I was skirting that line real, because
Yeah.
really you're talking officer conduct as it relates to policy, and boy, that's a gray line. I'm not even gonna look at Sue's face right now and talk about walking that line.
Well, I mean, that's the second large, you know, goal of this board is to review policy. So maybe if the way that you get there is by seeing videos of what actually happened, might help you have a better understanding of whether policy should be changed or not.
I think
And
that's
again, maybe
really
that's
interesting.
would be difficult for the public too, because, you know, we've existed for a long, long time, and people think if I file a complaint, I'm gonna get somebody to review it for this purpose, and now that's no longer available.
It's
Maybe
not,
that's-
yeah.
I'm just spitballing, so.
I mean, just in terms of those use of force reports that we got this time, I think what Pat is saying would be applicable to those. So, for example, and again, this is on me because I'm not familiar with the use of force policies as I should be, but, you know, should the policy say you can put your knee on somebody's neck? You know, should it say that you can manipulate a joint? Again, I think those are examples of policies that the board could consider after reviewing those use of force reports. Another thing that they could consider is should every officer have in the squad car a complaint report? So instead of trying to negotiate with somebody who might be escalated at the time, if you can say, fill out this report, send it to the city. So that I would view it as taking a policy that could take some of the stress off the officer of dealing with the person right on the spot. I mean, of course, they spend a lot of time trying to do that, but if there's a policy that says, fill this out, you know.
Yeah, I think I guess in my experience, if I'm an officer and I'm dealing with someone who's in that agitated state,
They're not gonna fill it out.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so there's either I need to be there for some sort of public safety purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and they're agitated, and I just can't disengage with them. Something
Mm-hmm.
has to happen here. Or if there's no reason for me to be there and they're agitated, and I can disengage and just leave, and there's nothing I need to do public safety, I'm going to do that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to be there, handing them a paper, I think could almost be more confrontational or
Okay.
cause an issue. Plus, if I'm there for a public safety purpose and someone is agitated, and for whatever the circumstance, I can't just leave and disengage. For me to disengage enough to go to a squad car, reach inside, take my eyes off the person, find that form, bring. I think that all just the complications of that really add up
Okay.
to the costs outweighing the benefits.
So, that makes sense to me. And the reason I asked that question is I have the impression, which could be wrong, that when there's like a domestic abuse situation, do officers provide the apparent victim with
Resource information.
Yeah.
So when I was an officer, we had a very specific domestic violence victims' rights form, which I assume still exists and was by policy required to be given to the victim at domestic
And by state law.
and by state law.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking along those lines, but I understand what you're saying. If, here, take this, kind of like, look it up on the website. If somebody's agitated, they're not gonna look it up on the website, and it could further escalate.
And I think that's where
But,
there's also
yeah.
the just agitation versus mental health situation. Whereas if it's the mental health situation, then they have the referrals to the liaisons who can follow up the next day, again, when emotions have calmed down and follow up and kind of see what they can connect them to.
Can I say one thing? And I agree with Dave. What I would want to avoid is giving somebody that paper and then they feel obligated to fill it out.
Okay.
And then that comes in as a complaint when
Yeah.
their intent isn't necessarily to complain
Okay.
about conduct. And then I get it and I read it and I don't know what to do with it because it's not necessarily a complaint. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So I guess maybe I have mixed feelings on that.
Okay.
I think if you give it to them, they're gonna feel obligated to fill it out. Some may not even fill it out, but those that do may be filling it out, not thinking that they're filling it out as a complaint. Or when, right?
So venting,
Yeah,
or it'd
it's-
be venting versus an actual.
With something that the
complaint.
officer would be dealing with at the scene, or maybe that's a follow-up for mental health liaisons if it's a crisis situation or something like that. And may not, I think it would just be routed maybe inappropriately at that point,
Okay.
but.
Well, actually, that raises another question. Is your mental health advocates, is there a routine process for them to interface with officers for suggestions back and forth?
Oh, they get referrals all the time. And so I do know that the officers make referrals to them all the time, probably daily.
But I mean,
So-
do they get do the mental health personnel have an opportunity to say, if you do this, then it might be a better way to interact with somebody who's having a mental health crisis? In other words, Jessica, do you know what I'm saying?
So I don't work for them, but I
Yeah.
imagine that naturally occurs.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah.
And there's offices within the police department for that
Yeah.
staff. So they're with the officers. Also, the officers, I assume, and make sure I keep up here, they're all still going through the 40-hour crisis intervention training?
Yep.
So the officers go through that entire.
And they get training by the VA as well.
Oh, they do? Okay.
And don't forget too that there's a co-responder, an officer co-responder that goes with them to calls. So we have the mental health liaisons through community, and they're partnered with Officer Davis, who they all respond together to crisis calls.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah, so there is that co-response. And she's dressed down, so she's in uniform, but it's a softer uniform, yeah.
When somebody has a complaint after the new law becomes into effect, What is the process they use?
I assume they can file it at the police department or still be able to at the clerk's office. I assume.
Not with us anymore.
Okay.
It would just be the police department.
So if they have a concern, they would file there's a process through the police department currently that
Yeah,
exists.
They
Okay.
have
Got it. And that, I would assume the chief reviews and there's a process regarding that, right?
My
Okay.
understanding is it's basically the
Just
same
the-
process.
right.
Okay,
It's almost,
okay.
yeah, like he's doing double.
Got it, okay.
The one that goes there plus anybody that submits to the review board.
So that gets me, one second,
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
gets
no.
me to sort of which I was assuming, but assumptions get us in trouble, so I wanted to seek clarification. But that sort of gets us back to perhaps, right, the chief would see that having an advisory group, in instances, he might want to lean into that group in a certain complaint, right, that he's evaluating. Not to suggest that he doesn't have the skill set to evaluate that complaint, but he might want to get this advisory perspective on that to help inform his work as well. So I think that's another way in which we can sort of think about, right, there's this potentially this other voice that's involved in managing complaints, if indeed the chief would see value in that, without a formal, I don't know if formal is the right word, without the current structure that exists.
I mean, again, I can ask Jeff and Dave this, that I think if I were the chief, and I'm probably a whole lot more narrow-minded than the chief, but that would strike me as extra work, and I would probably want to have input from my staff before civilians.
No, I wouldn't encourage that what we provide overrides as an advisory
Yeah,
board.
yeah,
What
no,
that,
yeah.
I mean, he's doing the work now, what he does for
Right,
this group,
right,
right?
right, yeah.
But perhaps it could be very well a policy, right? He's seen something with a policy and then he asks for some feedback from a citizen's lens to help inform his work. Or he's evaluated a couple of, I'm making this up, I have no idea, a couple of consistent, I don't know, challenges with the particular person. The advisory board doesn't know who that is, but he could certainly bring information forward to seek additional information from another lens as he's making decisions. As a citizen, I would find that to be quite powerful as well, right? It's not only the police chief who is an expert in the work that he does and surrounded himself with experts in that work, but also thinking about, well, how does the general public sort of see this and what are the misconceptions that might exist around this? So help me understand how might be a better way to, I don't know, have an educational setting where people understand what it is that we're doing, or how do we write this policy using this word instead of this word so it makes better sense for the community to understand. So I think, that idea that he might lean into that group to provide an additional way to see things, I think would be insightful. As just a general citizen, I would appreciate knowing that was happening. So.
Well, in my experience, having done some of the policy reviews, it's complex and very abstract. So reading through those policies, they're intentionally, I think, somewhat vague because you can't account for every possible scenario. And, I think, for example, you had the concept of providing the complaint information. From my perspective, I saw problems with that because I have different experiences than you.
Right.
But when reviewing a policy, I might be looking at the policy black and white based on my experiences, but then you come in with a different perspective, and those outside voices may be able to see something that the law enforcement staff and the legal staff don't immediately see. At worst, that advisory board would bring questions which would result in great conversations about policies and why they are the way they are, and maybe get the answer. I don't see a negative to that one.
How would you structure it?
I guess I don't know enough about the whole city structure as to whether it's just a volunteer with a certain number, or if the chief is directed to have this on a certain time frame versus it's just some bullet that the chief should have this board type of thing. I would like to see, maybe it's if we do it quarterly and the police department staff brings whatever policies were updated that previous quarter and pick the top 2 or 3, and they can become like a short presentation on those and a Q&A where the community could ask questions about those. You know, maybe an open QA at the end. I could see benefits in a group like that bringing a situation they saw on the news in some other state and saying, here's what we saw on the news, here's a news article, can we just have an open discussion about what policies you have in place that would cover this, and would we see the same response, or how do your policies fit these areas? I think just that open talk over the policies would be really beneficial.
Quarterly, basically. So
I'm
you're
throwing
throwing it out.
I'm just
but
throwing
yeah,
that
yeah.
out there, yeah.
And it would be advertised on the website and elsewhere, maybe, so people know.
Yeah, and I haven't thought it through that far yet. So.
Yeah. I come back to the committee to make maybe more specific recommendations to the council.
Well, can I throw out, maybe not at this point anyway, micromanage it so much. I think they're looking for ideas
Yes.
that you have. And then I don't know if they would then look to staff and say, what do you think, and can you bring us something? Possibly.
Kind of going back to the investigate the possibility of, you know, because,
I think they need something to kind of
yeah,
start their conversation on their end too.
I think in the few discussions I've had with the chief about this, it sounds like his initial thought is what you've already discussed, some sort of informal advisory board, whether that's dealing with the policy side of it, and that's bringing in other people through these community partnerships that we have. And I know that, so for example, one thought was, we've worked with Kevin Sanders from the NAACP quite a bit, seeing if he wanted to be on this advisory board, or so. Again, we haven't discussed it a whole lot, but that was one of his initial thoughts. But getting ideas on who to bring in on the board and for those discussions.
So that if he's meeting with, for example, Kevin Sanders now, is there any type of advisory board in place now, or are those more informal meetings?
No, I just say that because he'll be a part of like the hiring process when we do interviews and stuff like that. So that was what initially came to mind, but somebody, community partners like that, who would be involved with it potentially.
We use the advisory board structure extensively in the work that I do regularly, and it's very helpful, especially if you've got the right voices that bring different perspectives to the table. Right, they provide insight into the work that we're doing, how we're doing our work. So I think if constructed right, and sort of right a sense of accountability and what they're there to do, I think it can be very beneficial. It's been my experience. So.
Is there anything that we want to talk about with the complaints that are out there, and do we have any idea?
I think,
Yeah.
Pat, is that something you would want to do in executive session? Because you're going to have to talk about the complaints and the timelines and the figuring out
Okay.
how you want to handle it
Yeah.
in
Okay.
closed session.
Okay.
I think the board needs to give me some direction too about whether you want me to attend that work session with you or not.
Okay.
how much money do we have left in the budget? We got 1 month left, right, this month?
Well, no. I mean, we have until.
I did that just for you.
Oh, right. That's right, yeah. Wasn't thinking fiscal.
I guess I would suggest that's a good idea. From my perspective.
I don't know enough to provide insight, so I'll lean into the experts at the table.
You know, I could think of questions that might come up that you would be able to answer that perhaps those of us that'll be at the meeting might not, you know, be able to speak directly to
You mean to answer at the meeting or later?
at the work session.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, at the work session.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know that there will be, but
Yeah, I mean, if
Yeah.
questions come up that you want to address with me later, I could always, will it be recorded? Yeah. You could tell me to look at the recording then.
Can we quote you as suggesting that the committee continue to review policy?
Sure.
I mean, because I think one value of asking him to attend would be, you know, the moral authority and legal authority that he has to make a suggestion like that.
Yeah, I want to be clear, I'm not giving you legal advice to do that.
No,
Yeah,
but
I'm
you,
just throwing
yeah.
it out there, and
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that you do it, so.
Oh, you're not, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
It
talking.
was just an
just an
idea.
idea,
Yeah.
spitballing.
Okay, okay.
Any other discussions on 311?
Just one other thing Mary brought up about the mental health liaisons, and apparently the chief gave a presentation to one of the city council work sessions, you said around May 20th.
It was May 20th,
May
yeah,
20th.
it was really excellent, and the liaisons were there too, and talked about their work, we've answered so many questions, and I wanted to yell out, just so you know. It's a working session you can watch, because it was an excellent presentation. Also, taking a look at the 2024 annual report, really informative, a lot of information, really civilian friendly, written.
What was the date that that presentation was
It
made?
was on the May 20th.
May 20th.
Yeah. And it was really, really well done. It answered so many questions that I've been asked in the community. So I was very thankful that he did that. Is this public time?
No.
No.
He's coming up there pretty quickly,
No,
though.
it's not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We
See
need
what
that.
happens?
Yeah, we probably.
Violating
Yeah.
the rules.
I start talking and
So,
it just doesn't.
No other
We got
discussion
a lot,
on
yeah.
311? Move on to old business, of which there is none. And then item 8. Oh,
sorry.
Get anyway.
Yep.
Item 8, public comment. Please
Thank
keep your
you.
comments to 3 minutes.
Oh, that's me. Did I do my 3 minutes yet or no? Or is that?
Feel free, we kind of cut you off there.
As always, I want to thank each one of you for the time you spend doing this. It does make a difference to the public, even though I seem to be the only member of the public that keeps showing up. I think that the public relations is suffering right now and is kind of in the hands of people who are not you. And so I'm grateful that this committee does exist. I'm sorry that it will be disbanded, but I think that if you can come up with any kind of a public relations effort, it matters when the citizens are involved in police. I call it peopling. We have to people our police because it's very easy for the work to really break your heart, really break your heart. And people can make a difference with that just by befriending, asking questions that are not confrontative. There's so many laws I want to understand, and the questions are easy and the answers are always excellent because you want to understand how do you use this law, whatever it might be. But I think that I'm a grandmother, so I think that children solve everything. And when you see officers around children, they're quickly reminded about their own humanity. And it is very difficult to maintain that in this work. You know the numbers. I give them to you all the time. I can recite ones that just rip at your soul. There was a suicide for a boy that was in our lives, our family's life for years, North Liberty. There's some broken hearts going on there. It's up to us, to people, our police departments, and do good things there. Cookies. They love cookies in Coralville. That's how I buy police time. I'll give you cookies if you'll talk to me about it. But, you know, thank you for doing what you do because it matters.
Thank you.
Item 9, board information. Anyone have anything they want to share or anything to add to the next agenda?
I have a question for Jeff. Sorry, this is just policy.
Okay.
Are officers routinely trained to do warrant requests through E EDMS?
So this is the section on the agenda where we suggest things to be discussed at the next meeting.
Oh, okay. So I can't ask him that question.
We
You
could
can ask
add
for
it
it
to
to be
the
put on the
agenda for next
agenda
meeting.
for next meeting.
Okay, I'm asking.
So,
And do you want it for E EDMS?
I'm curious about police training on warrants, whether it's, whether all officers typically receive it, and with E EDMS, this is something that arrived after me, you know, and how long does it take to get a warrant now?
So, okay, so can you define E EDMS?
The
Electronic.
electronic document filing system. Okay, so
And then are you talking all warrants? Or just
I'm-
arrest or search warrants?
I'm talking search warrants. Search warrants. Okay.
Got it?
Anything else? Staff information.
Okay, so Saul's email, he emailed all of you guys, but I also gave you hard copies. He mentions, or has 3 different topics that he listed, and I just am curious if anybody wants any of them added to the July agenda.
Yes. The frequent flyer issue, I think, would be particularly helpful. And he doesn't,
So-
I actually emailed him when I got that and said, what are your recommendations to the council as to avoid these issues? What would you ask the council to do? But I think that would be something we could discuss here.
For what it's worth, this has been an ongoing topic of discussion
Okay.
from this particular board member
Right.
Okay.
many times. So it's just for what it's worth, it's been discussed in open and closed session.
Okay. Were any resolutions reached or not?
We can discuss that at the next meeting.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I'll add that topic to the next meeting. Okay.
No other staff info? Okay. Sorry. Did I kick it? Future meetings, July 8th and August 12th. Anyone have any conflicts they want to bring up?
I won't be here July 8th.
Okay. That leaves us down to 4. If there's any, I guess.
Can I ask a question about that? I'll ask the question, then tell me to be quiet if it's the wrong place.
Okay.
So we have vacancies on this board. There are people that applied for those positions. Are we doing anything for the next couple months with those?
Yeah.
Do you get where I'm going?
Right, because at this point in time, everything is to continue as usual.
Okay.
So we have Saul's replacement. She'll start at the July 8th meeting.
Okay.
And then I believe it's next week's council meeting will be selecting Jerry's replacement.
Okay.
So
Okay.
to get
I was
back
just
up to
curious
the
to kind of for the next couple of
right,
months.
right. So yeah, it just right now everything is in limbo, so that we're just continuing on
Okay.
as usual. So.
Okay. Fair enough.
So have one conflict. Do we want to look at moving the July 8th or move forward knowing that she won't be able to make it?
I think we're probably okay. because if we have a member join, that was part of where I was going.
Yep.
We will have, yes, a new member, but someone new, so we'll then be back from, we'll be back up to 5.
All right. I consider a motion to adjourn to executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Call open session back to order at 7:38.
What time? 19:30, I'm sorry, okay.
Yes. For complaint 2409, consider a motion to accept the letter of extension for complaint 2409 as presented or amended and forward to City Council.
So moved.
Second. Oh, sorry. All yours.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. The letter, you guys didn't make any amendments to, right? Oops, where am I?
Correct.
Okay, alright, so it's as presented. Okay, roll call. Braddock,
Aye.
Hobart Collis,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Meckus, Atkins.
Yes.
Schwint.
Yes.
Okay.
Ready?
Okay.
I'll make a motion to, on complaint 2503 and 2506, to accept summarily dismissal for both of those.
So in 2503 is as presented, 2506 is as amended.
Well,
It says
Okay.
presented.
Sorry,
true.
I
That's
thought
true.
they
You're
were
right.
both gonna
Yeah.
be, that's
Yep.
why I
Yep.
combined them.
So do you want to do
Silly
it
me.
independently?
Sure. So do 2503, I mean,
Motion to
Start
accept CPRB report of summarily dismissal for 2503.
Second.
who wants the second?
I
Okay.
did.
Okay. Hobart Collis,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Meckus, Atkins,
Yes.
Schwint,
Yes.
Braddock.
Yes.
Okay, so now you'll do the same again, only for 2506
All right.
as
Consider
amended.
a motion to accept CPRB report of summary dismissal for complaint 2506 as amended and forward to City Council.
Second.
Oh,
Make a motion. I make a motion.
okay. Need a second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, so Jensen,
Yes.
Meckus, Atkins,
Yes.
Schwint,
Yes.
Braddock,
Yes.
Hobart Collis.
Yes.
Consider a motion to adjourn.
Second. Make a motion.
Second.
Oops.
It is nearly 8 o'clock, you guys. I still got work to do.
So wasn't
Oh
even
my
here.
gosh.
Okay. All in favor of
this
adjournment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I don't.
So meeting adjourned.
We're daring his life.
Meeting adjourned at 7:41.
Okay.
Say anything.